All right, let's jump right in. We're going to look at this really fascinating mystery, one that's happening, right outside your front door. It's all about how our cities and even the seasons are secretly shaping our kids' health.
I mean, it sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? But this is the big paradox that researchers are trying to figure out. Think about it. A kid can go play soccer for 2 hours, hitting all their activity goals, and then spend the rest of the day just sitting around. How is that possible? We're going to get into exactly why that happens.
Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to break it down. There are actually two separate problems here. And yeah, they sound like the same thing, but trust me, they are worlds apart.
So here's the key difference. You've got physical inactivity on one side. That's basically not getting enough of that heart-pumping, breathless kind of activity. But then you have sedentary behavior, which is a whole other beast. That's just about the total time you spend sitting or lying down. And what's really interesting is that the latest research shows that being too sedentary has its own health risks, even if you do get your hour of exercise in. So you see, we're really tackling two completely different issues.
All right, so every good mystery needs a setting, right? For this story, our setting is Saskatoon, Canada. And it's the perfect place for this research because the seasons there are, well, they're extreme. That makes it a fantastic real-world lab for seeing how the environment itself gives us clues about how active our kids are. Let's take a look at how this city, Saskatoon, actually grew over time. The oldest neighborhoods, they were built on a classic grid pattern. Super easy to walk around, shops mixed in with houses, you know the type. Then you get these fractured grids, a bit more spread out, a bit more designed for cars, and finally you have the modern suburbs with those long, winding, curvy streets where it's pretty much just houses. Each one of these designs creates a completely different universe for a kid to grow up and play in.
So let's line up our suspects. Suspect number one is pretty obvious, especially in a place like Saskatoon, winter. We're talking serious cold and snow that sticks around for months. It's this massive factor you just can't change, and it completely rewrites the rules for being outdoors.
All right, next up is spring. You know, that in-between time. The snow's melting, everything's kind of slushy and wet, and you never know what the weather's gonna do. So the question is, how does this messy transitional season impact whether a kid even wants to go outside and play?
And then, of course, there's summer. The days are long, the weather's great. I mean, this should be the absolute peak season for being active, right? It's our best-case scenario, the baseline for what's really possible when it comes to outdoor play.
And our last suspect is autumn. Things are cooling down, kids are back in school with all the schedules that come with it, and the sun starts setting earlier and earlier. So yeah, this season has its own unique challenges and routines. So, with all these variables, how do we actually figure this out? Well, we follow the detectives. In this case, that's the research team behind the Smart Cities Healthy Kids Project. Their whole mission was to track kids through all these different neighborhoods and all 4 seasons to find out what's really happening.
And they didn't just talk to a few kids, we're talking about a huge study. They got 800 children, all between 10 and 14 years old, to participate. And that age is so important, right? It's when those lifelong habits really start to set in. A sample size that big, well, it means their findings have some serious weight to them. Now, to get the full story, these researchers gathered an incredible amount of data. And this wasn't just a one-time thing. They measured everything, how much kids moved, where they were, what the weather was like, over and over again, through every single season. They basically built a complete, year-long diary for every single kid in the study.
So, what kind of gear did they use? Well, first up was a device called an accelerometer. You can just think of it like a really accurate fitness tracker. The kids wore it on their hip and it measured everything, from a slow walk to an all-out sprint. This gave the researchers objective data on not just if the kids were moving, but exactly how hard they were moving.
But here's where it gets really cool. They paired those accelerometers with GPS loggers, and that was the game changer. Because now, they didn't just know how a kid was moving, they knew exactly where it was happening. Was it at home, in the schoolyard, at the local park? Suddenly, they could map all that activity data to real places in the city.
Okay, so with all this amazing data pouring in, the real detective work could start. The researchers zeroed in on 3 main questions, and the answers they found, well, they pretty much cracked the code on what drives kids' activity. So first things first, where are kids actually active? Well, the data was super clear. In the warmer months, you'd see big spikes in activity at schoolyards and parks, total hotspots. But when winter hit, outdoor activity just fell off a cliff. What little movement they did record shifted almost completely inside, to their homes or indoor sports centers. And no surprise here, but sedentary time, it was highest at home no matter what the season was.
Okay, that brings us to our second big clue. Does the kind of neighborhood you live in actually matter? The answer is a huge yes. The GPS data showed something fascinating. Kids in those older, walkable, grid-style neighborhoods, they were still getting out for short walks, even in the middle of winter. But in the newer, car-dependent suburbs, spontaneous outdoor play just disappeared when it snowed. Any activity they got was almost always because their parents drove them to some scheduled indoor thing.
And this all leads to the big finale. The final question, does the season just win out in the end? And the answer is, kinda yes, but it's more complicated than that. Winter is, for sure, the #1 obstacle for physical activity, no doubt about it. But, and this is a huge but, the study proved that a well-designed neighborhood, like those walkable grids, can act like a shield. It helps lessen winter's impact. The way we build our cities doesn't beat the weather, but it absolutely helps us fight back.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's that the way we design our neighborhoods can either be a huge help or a huge hindrance, especially when the weather gets tough. And knowing this gives us a practical blueprint. Solving this mystery gives us a real roadmap for building healthier cities for our kids.
And look, this information isn't just for academics. Urban planners now have solid proof that things like grid patterns help kids stay active all year round. City officials can see why clearing snow from sidewalks is just as critical as plowing the roads. And schools, they get a clear picture of just how important their play spaces, both indoors and out, really are, especially when it gets cold.
You know, this quote from the researchers really sums it up perfectly. The whole point of a study like this is to turn all this data into actual, real-world change. It's about creating solid evidence that can guide the policies that shape the places we all live.
And that really leaves us with one last big idea to chew on. Usually when we think of a playground, we picture a specific spot with a fence around it, right? But what if we flipped that idea on its head? Now that we've seen all this evidence, what if we designed our entire cities? I'm talking our streets, our sidewalks, our public squares, to be one giant playground. That's the real challenge and the real opportunity this research leaves us with.